Whiskey Throttle Spotlight is brought to you by Yamaha, the leaders in the power sports industry. Join the Blue Crew today. By Nihilo Concepts, boost your bike's performance, reliability, and aesthetics with Nihilo products. Flow Vision, high-performance goggles and eyewear. And by Complete Racing Solutions, your one-stop shop for human performance and wellness.
Hey guys, it's Ping. Thanks for stopping by. We are here in Cairo, Georgia at Star Racing Yamaha's facility. Second time I've been here in the last few months, and much different conditions this time. Nice and cool, great weather, track was amazing. And we're here for something really exciting. Easily the most anticipated bike of the year, the 23 Yamaha YZ450F. Anytime a manufacturer launches a completely new bike like this, and it is completely new, top to bottom, I think Travis Preston said there's only one engine hanger on the whole bike that's the same from last year, same part number. So all new from the ground up. And usually when that happens, we see them take sort of a step forward in certain areas, but then they always, there's always things that come in and need to be refined. It's like a one step forward, two steps back, and then over the next couple of seasons, they'll refine that, fine tune that, and get the gains that they really want. You're always like excited, but thinking, all right, what things are we gonna find on this new model that doesn't work as they anticipated? And I can tell you this, just a quick general impression, they nailed everything on this bike. It is easily the best 450 in stock trim I've ever ridden. And there's a story behind why that is. And talking to Travis Preston again, he said, typically what would happen is the Japanese would come over and bring parts and they do a test, and then they go home and they work on stuff, and they come back, or the test guys would go to Japan. And it's kind of a slow process when you're in pre-production and prototype machines. Once COVID happened, he said they did one test in Japan, then COVID kicked in, and Japan was just having to send parts over. So they would go out and test it, and by 5 o'clock here PM, that was 7 a.m. over there, they'd get on the phone with them and say, hey, here's what happened. And Japan would go to work that day as those guys went to bed, come up with some new settings, some new ideas. The next morning, they would share with them what they've learned. And he said it was like this turbocharged the testing process. And as a result, they made like multiple years of advancement in one new machine. And that's what it feels like. It really feels like a 2026 modeling. I mean, it's crazy how far advanced this feels from last year's bike. If you got on a 22 after riding this, it feels like an old TTR or something. It's crazy. So let's get into kind of just the feel of it. Let's start there. They've opened up the rider compartment. It's much flatter. The foot pegs are actually 5 millimeters lower and back a little bit. So it just kind of opens up that rider triangle a little bit. And I didn't think I'd like that when I heard it. I thought, oh man, I'm a shorter guy. That's gonna probably feel stretched out to me. Not at all. Super comfortable. And obviously a guy like Travis Preston even likes it. So from tall to short, it seems to be just a better all around feel for everybody. The seat is, I was concerned about that too when I first sat on it. It's like completely round. There's no flat top to it. Typically a seat would have a flat top and rounded corners. This thing is like just completely round. And as I'm sitting on it, I'm like, gosh, is this gonna be weird? And honestly, it's not. It actually allows you to roll the bike from left to right easier, which makes sense when you think about it. So the feel of the bike is flatter, a little more open, a little more neutral feeling. The pocket has gone away even more, very flat, which is sort of a trend with all new bikes, and comfortable. Chassis and suspension, let's move on to that. We didn't have a ton of bumps today. There wasn't so many people riding, but there were sections they left rough, and we had some good braking bumps and a couple of chattery acceleration chop sections. There's high speed, there's tight, so it's a good feel. And we started out kind of deep and tacky in the morning and got dry and hard packed by the afternoon. So we got a pretty good feel of how it works. And I can tell you that it's 5.5 pounds lighter than last year's bike, but it feels 25 pounds lighter. Whatever they've done to the engine placement and the chassis, they lightened the crank, just the things they've done inside make it feel incredibly light. The first time you ride this, you're gonna go, whoa. It takes very little rider input. This was my first thing I came in and said, I have to minimize my input to the bike. If you try to ride it like the 22, it's gonna feel kind of like nervous. You have to just minimize the rider inputs, whether that's throttle, braking, leaning, turning the wheel. A very small amount of input and this thing reacts. And so once you figure that out, it makes it easier to ride. The thing initiates a turn better than any bike I've ever ridden. Better than Suzuki was always known for that. This bike's way ahead of that, anything that they put out. As you come into a turn, you kind of start looking where you want to go, and this thing starts turning. And it stays planted, and that's in sweepers, flat turns, ruts. You can cut out of berms. It turns incredibly well and feels just really light and nimble. I guess it's the best way I can describe it. To me, that was one of the best features about it. It's just a very light, playful, nimble feeling. The best cornering Yamaha I've ever ridden. Not even close. So they've nailed that setup. And I was worried, oh, am I gonna get head shake or is it gonna be nervous at speed? I never had that issue. Something else that's different about this, chassis and suspension wise, is the sag numbers based on the new design are between 90 and 100 millimeters of sag. where in the past we've been 100, 105, 108. So definitely different, pay attention to that. And at 97 is where we set it for me, because I tend to like a little more sag. And I even open up that high speed a bit just to get to settle down in the rear, kind of settle into corners the way I like. Very good handling bike. We'll do a race spec video, we'll have that coming and talk about better settings, how we can kind of fine tune it, but there wasn't a lot that needed done. The engine, super responsive, and that's another thing that you will be reminded of, which this is kind of a 450 thing anyway, is leave the clutch alone as much as you can, but even more so in this bike. I don't know if it's because of the lighter crank, the throttle response is instantaneous, and it's not abrupt, but it's right there, and man, you can pull taller gears than you'd normally be able to. It's just power everywhere. They've made this thing, it revs farther, but it comes on earlier. Like I said, it's all improvement with no downside. I almost thought, man, maybe on a slick track I could go down a tooth on the rear sprocket, just because there is so much power right away. There's two maps that come stock with it, a standard map and then a light and linear one, you know, a little softer. As the track got slick, I went to that lighter map. It was a little better. Just coming out of turns, you weren't worried about it breaking loose as much. And there's also a launch control setting with that. And then on the Power Tuner app, another awesome feature that Yamaha has, you can go in and play with the traction control as well. So that's something we'll have to continue to play with more. There's so many options. You know, it's incredible. All these 450s have gotten really good, and it's just about fine tuning and making the power usable and making it as broad as you can make it, right? Because the less you have to shift or worry about your RPM range, the better. And it's incredible engine. So there is the bolt-on hydraulic clutch, which I tried. You know, as far as a feel, it's not too different, but it is nice that you don't ever have to worry about it fading if you're somebody that's hard on the clutch. And if you buy the standard version, there's two bolts that come off, and you can bolt the hydraulic version right to it. It's a $300 aftermarket kit. So pretty affordable if it's something that you decide you want to go to later. And I thought that was cool as well. And everything else on the bike, the fit, the finish, brakes are great. You know, you could debate whether or not you like the look of the front end. The fender is definitely different when you're looking at it from a side or whatever, but when you're riding the bike, you don't notice it. It just feels normal. I think some of the oddity of the front number plate is that the brake line is now routed behind it, which I like. I think it's cleaner, but it definitely looks different, and I've had some people go, I don't know if I like that, but hey, if you're enjoying your motorcycle, and that's the biggest complaint you have, I think they're doing pretty good. Like I said, the big takeaways for me were the light and responsive feel of this bike. Like I said, 5.5 pounds, but it feels like way more than that. It feels so much lighter and freer and just easy to maneuver. Whether that's cornering, jumping it, you know, changing lines. Crazy how I could just move from one side of the track to the other, or rail around a berm and it would stay planted, or just pivot and snap out of it. And it did it all easily. You know, a lot of times that's the engine character and how they build it and the mapping that goes along with it. And it just nailed it. Really, really sharp tuning to this thing. So good suspension, good handling. Like I said, we're gonna need to go get this on some tracks we're familiar with to really fine tune the suspension. Home run on this motorcycle. These things are awesome. This is the 22 Yamaha 450 was winning shootouts already. This one's gonna smoke all of those bikes. I'm just telling you straight up, it's the best 450 I've ever ridden in stock trim, period. We're gonna have another video following up here, a race spec, giving you some good settings. But here's our initial impression. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for tuning in always, and we'll see you next time.